Okay, so our first creepypasta video was fun, but not really what you'd call spooky. It was more about the concept of spook and what creepypasta does with it as a genre. Though talking about creepypasta in such broad terms really doesn't do it justice. It's a hard genre to grasp without experiencing its mind-racking, sleep-depriving effect. Of course, different people have different nightmares, and creepypasta is, by nature, a diverse breed, so here, we have someone with us to help navigate the darkness. A purveyor of the perverse, a teller of tantalizing tales of terror, the master of the midnight hour himself. Let's pass it over to MrCreepyPasta to give us a taste of what the genre has to offer.
Just for a moment, I want you to imagine something. Think of a relative or a close friend or just anyone you know well. Imagine they tell you that someone they know is being stalked by some kind of mysterious creature, something with too many limbs and eyes like holes punched in reality. Creepy, but how can you trust a stranger? For all you know, it's just a story. But now imagine instead that this creature is, according to your friend or your relative, stalking them directly. Well, now you have a dilemma. They're either telling the truth, lying, or they're delusional, and since they're the one relating the story, there's some urgency to make that judgment call. This is the power of anecdotes, tales which are based purely in experience of others, lacking the evidence to confirm or deny their legitimacy. They could always be true. Your only real litmus test is whether you're willing to trust the storyteller. It'll probably come as no surprise that this is one of, if not the, most popular style of creepypasta. It covers everything from let's not meet stories about the dangers of strangers, to bizarre childhood recollections of imaginary friends like Mr. Widemouth. It even covers a lot of the more traditional ghost stories. Most of all, though, with the exception of stories which come from an obviously credible source, the true creepypasta tends to fit this mold. Home invaders, sinister Craigslist meetups, encounters with the psychopathic and the deranged. We're rarely presented with the means to divine whether these events actually occurred, and there's a strange allure in that. It blurs the line between fiction and reality. It gives us nightmares, which we almost believe can come true. Not all creepypastas come in the form of narratives. Some simply plant an idea in the shadows of the mind and leave the horror to blossom on its own. And in the vein of Bloody Mary and Ouija boards, creepypasta writers have been archiving this with their own homebrewed rituals. They lay out methods for manifesting something monstrous in the real world, and then the challenge falls to you. Will you follow the instructions and prove them false? Or will you accept that they could be telling the truth? In the end, what you choose doesn't really matter. You're already cursed. Once you know the rules, you're doomed to either wonder about them or risk the fulfillment of their ghastly promises. If you're a masochist and you want to torture yourself with some of these, seek out the Holders series, which details how and where to find certain world-ending artifacts. The Midnight Game, which explains how to invite a strange entity known as the Midnight Man into your home, or Three Kings, which is similar to the Midnight Game, if quite a bit more mysterious. A word of caution, though. There's a reason most of these come with a disclaimer. Do not, under any circumstance, try this. The paranormal and the monstrous are in some ways fundamentally frightening. The very concept of something which disobeys the rules of the world we're used to is often enough to set the heart racing. And yet at the same time, their transgressive nature keeps them at a safe distance. They aren't real. They don't pose a threat to you personally, just the character in the story. But what happens when you come across the evidence of them outside the fiction? When similar accounts crop up from unconnected sources? When the fiction itself places the monster in real locations and connects it to real events? Suddenly the horror is no longer some far-removed concept. It's a presence, encroaching on your reality. Perhaps this is why the urban legend framework is so popular for creepypasta. Games plagued by violent glitches, lost episodes of your favorite shows, full of wildly disturbing imagery, dark places buried deep within the web. These all contain threads which anchor them to the real world. It may not make them any more believable per se, but it brings them closer, allows them to taint the familiar with their black fingerprints. You may have noticed by now that a lot of these play with the question of truth. Is this person relating a real experience? Will this ritual actually summon something? Is this urban legend really just a legend? The more doubts we have about whether a story is truly fiction, the less comfortable we are dismissing its threats. It makes sense for so much creepypasta to hinge on this. It's a potent way to up the psychological ante. And yet, there are still countless examples of creepypasta which make no pretense of being true. Stories like Arizona and No One House, where the narrator falls victim to some terrible fate at the end. Even better, entities like the Slender Man and Jeff the Killer, who have very clear roots in fiction, sometimes make cameos in one another's stories. For some, these are deal breakers. They can't possibly be afraid of something that can't possibly be real. But for more impressionable minds, these tales are the most haunting of them all. Because they aren't bound to specific location or circumstance, they're free to transform inside the mind, adapting to the imagination of the audience. Unlike, say, the Jersey Devil, who is an urban legend, but only exists in the state of New Jersey. The Slender Man is fiction. The only places it can't be are the places you refuse to envision it. It could be standing behind you, right now, watching.
Alright. Well, there goes my relative sanity. Thanks, Mr. Creepypasta, for the overview of the genre and for filling us all with some good old-fashioned paranoia. If you're a glutton for punishment, you can always go visit the man himself over in his lair. Pretty much everything on the channel will mess you up a little bit, but we recommend Arizona and 1999 in particular. You can thank us, or more likely yell at us, later. We have one more video to make before we're done with Creepypasta, something a lot of you have been waiting patiently for since this month's first video. We're writing our own Creepypasta, so if you have any ideas or suggestions, now's the time. Let us know in the comments. As always, thanks for watching and keep making stuff up. We'll see you next week. Bye!